Hello and a warm welcome to another edition of the Irish Angle on Jump To It. As usual, it's myself, Johnny Ward and Emma Nagle, and we're going to have a look back at all the action from the Dublin Racing Festival. Lots to get through, so should be a good show. Emma, you were there for the weekend. You had a great time, I hear.
Yeah, no, it was. We were there. We was there for 2 days, and the Saturday and the Sunday. Saturday was a very buzzy crowd. People got in really early. You kind of know there was a lot of English race goers there by the time the kind of course was nearly full at 11 o'clock. It was a lot different. You see the Irish tend to get to the races a bit late, but Sunday with 5 big crowds there, up a lot in last year, and yeah, no, it was a brilliant weekend. Good to see a few of the shorter price horses turned over as well, kind of added to the excitement of it. You could hear a pin drop at sometimes in Leopardstown. I think when Lassie Mount was beat, everyone was a bit shocked, and Vincent Finegan as well bombed out very early. But no, it was a brilliant weekend.
Yeah, and huge crowds as well turned up, which is great to see. I know there were some issues, people talking about toilets having queues for them on Saturday, but you were saying to me off air, Emma, that the ladies had no queues at all. There was walk in whenever you wanted, which is very unusual. It was the other way around. It goes to show how many men turned up rather than women at the 2 days, I suppose. Johnny, what did you think of it? Big crowds, that's a definite positive, isn't it?
Absolutely, Vinny. Yeah, and I think it's very encouraging to see. I think the figures were something like 27% British racegoers, and I spoke to quite a few myself who were coming over, and they really had a wonderful time. And this is a bit of a flip, really, of the way it used to be. Maybe the English traditionally come over for Punchestown, but for British racegoers, considering the dominance of Willie Mullins, and that we'll probably talk about later, they're happy to obviously come over and enjoy themselves. And as Emma says, come in early, enjoy sort of a sporting weekend in Dublin. And I think, in fairness to Tim Husbands, this is a problem that the Curragh would probably love to have, but he's perhaps right when he says, you want the attendance to be sort of matched by the facilities and offer, and not have terrible queues. And I think they're happy with what is effectively, I think one of the days was almost a capacity figure. But racing for me, and I've said this a bit in recent years, a lot of the time when I go racing and there's barely a roar from the crowd when the winner passed the line, I think it's worrying that the atmosphere has gone from a lot of meetings. But definitely at these festivals it isn't, and I think it really, really adds to it. And I think if you're a young racegoer, you do want to come back when you experience what you experienced at the weekend.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. I think it's terrific. I think look, the weather probably played a part. Lots of things did. Ireland playing away, and the rugby might have played a little bit of a part to it too. But it's great to see, and they were very good figures. We'd 18,121 was the official attendance on Saturday, and then Sunday was a little dip on that, 16,830. So we had a total crowd 34,951, which is impressive for the 2 days. Moving on to some of the things we're obviously going to touch on. The first one is Willie Mullins. He trained 6 of the 8 Grade 1 winners over the weekend. He had 5 winners on Sunday alone. Gordon Elliott had the other 2, so that all 7 races were won by the 2 big yards on Sunday. So really, we're in a situation here where the dominance is extraordinary. And where do we go from here? Emma, do you think it's an issue, or do you think it's great for racing, or where do you see it? Like, obviously we're seeing the very best horses run in Ireland, which is a positive for us, but at the same time, some of the trainers must be struggling.
I mean, I suppose there's a few different ways you could look at it. I mean, like if you look at the Arkle on the Saturday, for example, one thing Willie is doing, he has the best horses in the country as well, which massively to the spectacle over the weekend. Without Willie being so competitive and really supporting the Dublin Racing Festival, like it wouldn't have been half the success it was. He made a lot of the races on the days. When his top horses flopped, he normally had the next best one in the race to come along and beat it anyway. Look, it's obviously it's not great for this in the spectacle. Smaller trainers are suffering over it, but you can't begrudge Willie Mullins too much because he's the best in the game. He might be the best there ever was. So no, look, he made the weekend what it was. You can't begrudge him too much for having the best horses. It's just the way it fell for him. And yeah, look, I don't think there's much more you can say on it, really.
Fair enough. The other thing, Johnny, just on this is Willie Mullins, despite having such a successful meeting, he still found time to criticise his stable jockey Paul Townend. What do you make of that? It's a bit unusual from him to do that publicly, I suppose. When you stick a microphone in someone's face shortly after a race, you're bound to get things that you mightn't get if you asked them 24 hours later. But what do you think? Is that something you were expecting from him after some of the rides, or not necessarily?
No, Vinny, it wasn't. It was, I think, to be honest, it was nearly as much of a talking point as any of the performances of the weekend was Willie being so candid, if you want, about the ride that Facile Vega got. And I think it was a bit like a parent of a child who's on the sideline, and if something goes wrong, blames the manager a bit. To be honest, it's never the player's fault, because, for me, Paul Townend will probably give better rides than he gave Facile Vega. He took on high definition up front. High definition is a horse with loads of flat speed, and it did look like they went too fast. But at the same time, for me, we've spoken so highly of Willie. I thought it was unusual for him to do that. I think, he could easily have waited until Paul Townend came off and given the bollocking of all time if he so wished. And I'd have to sort of look at the figures again, but I didn't think it was a crazily bad ride in terms of the fractions. Just visually, I thought he probably went too fast, not to the extent that it was entirely Paul Townend's fault. And for me, Facile Vega has a bit of a hole in him, because he emptied like he was shot. And for me, if he is the horse that he's spoken about, he would have at the very least suffered an honourable defeat. But he was beaten so far out that, for me, I'm not sure it was all about the ride at all. And to me, it was one of the talking points of the weekend, because you don't get that.
Yeah, I'd agree. It was a big talking point. The other one, then, just looking at some of the winners, we've talked about that Facile Vega, a big flop. So it's thrown that supreme market all over the place at this stage. The horse that beat Facile Vega, Il Était Temps, goes more or less co-favourite for the race with Facile Vega, and then we've Marine Nationale shortens up, even though the horse didn't turn up at the Dublin Racing Festival. What would you make of that race in particular, Emma? Just from an anti-post point of view, looking forward to Cheltenham, can you see Facile Vega coming back in 5 weeks' time to today?
Yeah, well, what I take out of the race at the weekend, I think there must have been something wrong with Facile Vega. He just went out too quick to be blaming just the pace of the race alone. You'd say maybe if he was just dropping off coming to the last hurdle and he was beat by something, then you'd say, oh, right, maybe he went too fast and just faded away. But he went out with like a light and very quickly. So I'd be very surprised if there wasn't something additional there. People were maybe suggesting, did he bleed or something like that? I haven't heard anything from Willie yet. I'm not sure if he said anything to any media yet. So I'll be waiting to see what he says. If the horse did bleed, I wouldn't be backing him again. I find it, when a horse bleeds, it can be their career can go kind of either way. If if it's something physically, if he came back stiff or something like that, I would forgive him. I just have to wait and see what he says. Marine Nationale probably is plenty short enough now, but if anyone listened to Barry Connell talking to Nick Luck on Sunday morning, he couldn't have been more confident. He told everyone to get on the double for Goodland and Marine Nationale. He thinks he'll win both. So, that kind of confidence is kind of hard to knock. The only thing about Marine Nationale now is, the Royal Bond form took a bit of a knock with Irish Point, ran no kind of race really in behind Il Était Temps that day. So yeah, it's kind of it's more open than it was. You wonder, maybe Willie, I think Willie was saying Imperial Pass would be most likely to go to the Ballymore, but you'd wonder, will he maybe detour himself, or maybe Gaelic Warrior? In fairness to Danny's horse there at Il Était Temps, though, he hasn't done much wrong. He's improving away. So yeah, he has his chance. I'm not going to be backing anything at the moment. If a genuine excuse came out for Gaelic Warrior, I think, not Gaelic Warrior, Facile Vega, I probably would back him at 4-1, but you'd have to wait and see what the fallback from his loss was first, I think.
Yeah, fair enough. Another race that there's been a big shake-up in the market is the Triumph Hurdle, where we had Lossiemouth beaten. I thought that was still a hell of a performance from Lossiemouth. But of course, you've got the winner, Gala Marceau, comes into the reckoning now. Johnny, what you make of that one, the Triumph?
Yeah, I think this is, you wonder if you asked Paul Townend which of the two rides he was least happy with, that or Facile Vega, which would he come up with? Because for me, this was a mess of a race. And again, I'm kind of going on that revolving camera, Vinny. I'm not a big fan of it, and you were kind of, I think you just missed a lot of stuff, what's going on. But it looked like there was a fair bit of traffic problems in the first sort of, in the middle part of the race, and that affected Lossiemouth. And I'm with you. I thought she produced a brilliant form. She would actually be my horse to take out at the weekend, I think, if you were to give a horse going forward, because the ground that she made up to finish second, she got badly barred coming around the bend as well, and she must have lost 4 or 5 places in that scrimmage, and that Paul Townend will obviously be unhappy happened. And you know, the betting suggested there were some costly flops this weekend from the Mullins yard. The betting suggested she was expected to win, despite the fact that reportedly at home she's not the flashiest. But for me, even in defeat, she actually almost enhanced her reputation. That might sound daft, but I thought it was a great performance considering all that happened.
Okay, another one we'll look at is Blue Lord. Another one that's you could class it as a flop, I suppose, considering how hot a favourite Blue Lord was going into the race. But Gentleman to Me goes and turns around the form. It's a 48 length turnaround from what happened at Christmas with the same 2 horses. At Christmas, Blue Lord was 41.5 lengths in front of Gentleman to Me, and Gentleman to Me comes out now and wins by 7 lengths. For me, if you're to take things literally, this is Rona McNally stuff, isn't it? It's massive improvement. In the Rona McNally case, which we're not going to properly touch on in this show, I don't think, but Rona McNally there were 5 horses that they listed in the inquiry where there was dramatic improvement, and one of them was Dreel Deal over hurdles, which was £61. The other 4 of them were less improvement than Gentleman to Me showed from one run to the other. So there's a danger poor LJP might lose this if the IHRB are to follow the trend of what they did with Rona McNally, and he may have to give the prize money back at some stage in the future, maybe 2 or 3 years' time. What do you make of that, Johnny? You were fancying Blue Lord for Cheltenham. That race is all up in the air now, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I mean, Willie's saying after the race that he's talking of stepping Blue Lord up in trip. I mean, again, he does see things differently to me. But the one thing I would not be doing after watching that race is stepping him up in trip. I mean, if he went up to 2 miles 5 there, would he have run any better? I mean, to me, he's a horse. Obviously, I've backed him for Cheltenham, but he's a horse that has kind of cost me money in the past when he hasn't found a lot. And this was the old disappointing Blue Lord. He found nothing. Like, he was beaten 7 lengths by a horse rated 158. Now, Gentleman to Me must be one of the greatest enigmas in training at this stage. It's baffling how in and out he can be. On his day, obviously, he was very good here. You look at So Royal, I know he made a mistake, but he did beat him comprehensively. And just I suppose the take off the race for me was that Blue Lord was just so disappointing. Maybe it was an off day. His record over fences has been phenomenal, but I mean, I'm talking through my pocket here, but I can't see how stepping him up and trip is going to solve a problem if he has it. Maybe he'll bounce back. He'll come to Cheltenham a bit fresh, but he was very disappointing for me.
Yeah, one little interesting aside to that is the fact that Gentleman to Me, the time he recorded in winning was 4 minutes 14.6 over 2 miles 1 Leopardstown yielding ground. And at Christmas, Blue Lord won the race in the exact same time, 4 minutes 14.6. Don't know what it means, but it's just interesting. It shows Blue Lord didn't run quite to the form it did at Christmas. That's certainly true. And obviously, Gentleman to Me is stones better than we saw at Christmas. That race is all over the place as an anti-post race. The Champion Chase now with Energamine obviously beaten as well, and Edward Stone. So like it's all up in the air there, all to play for. If Gentleman to Me turns up in Cheltenham in the form we saw there, or the form it had in Aintree last year, obviously it's a major contender now. Moving on to a few other ones, we had El Fabiolo. That was a hell of a performance, wasn't it? One of the best ones. Did you think of the weekend? What do you think, Emma?
Yeah, I mean, it was a massive performance by him, to be honest. I wasn't really expecting it. I fancied appreciated it coming into it, but he just kind of seemed to run a little bit flat. Thought Danny went really, really quick on Dysart Dynamo, and in fairness to the horse, he did well to keep going. I thought he was just going to bomb out completely with the speed he went, but he battled away and finished, was he third or fourth? Banbridge stayed on well. Probably a horse is going to step up to 2 mile 4. More than likely, he was just a bit outpaced, I'd say, the whole way through. But El Fabiolo, you think now, is probably the leading Irish hope coming into the arc. He'd have to be. You probably worry about coming up against John Bonnet. Well, but he made a bit of a mistake. I think 4 out And we saw at Aintree last year what got him beat against John Bon was his jumping. So John Bon is a brilliant jumper of a fence. So, you know, he'll have to be nearly foot perfect, I think, to beat him. But the engine is there, like to win that race by 10 lengths, what was looking like probably as good a novice chase as you'd ever find, to win it by 10 lengths was massive. And it just showed the engine that the horse has. It'll be interesting to see, does Darrell Doff now coming to Cheltenham? It would be harsh to see it. Obviously, the way the arrangement goes, Paul probably gets the first choice, but I think we've probably never seen Darrell Jacob happier coming back into the winner's enclosure. He was just delighted to get the win on him, and yeah, no, he's a very good horse, I think.
Yeah, he put daylight between himself and his rivals from the last, all right. Like coming down to the last, you thought it could have been any one of 3 or 4 perhaps winning it, but he wins 10 lengths in the end. There's no disputing that as superiority over his rivals on the day, at least. Another one then is Mighty Potter, now 6-4 chance for the Turners. What do you make of that one, Johnny? Is that look? It was a hell of a race. In fairness, Mighty Potter did it really well. He was the only non-Willie Mullins horse in the race. The other 5 were all Willie Mullins. Is that a horse you'd fancy for Cheltenham for the Turners, Johnny?
Yeah, I think he's a massive chance, Billy. The 2 novice chase performances in Fabiola was phenomenal. I thought Appreciated was a bit vulnerable. You know, I thought his odds were a bit short coming into the race, and considering what he'd achieved, but he was absolutely slammed by Fabiola. And Mighty Potter in the picture there, he just keeps impressing, and I was really taken with what he found off the last. Like, he absolutely pulled away. He's a brilliant jumper as well. And Gordon doesn't have that many sort of star novice types going to the festival. It really is. You look at Willie, like even in the Supreme, I think he's 4 of the first 5 in the betting. So Gordon to have a horse like this, and obviously the whole story around it as well with you know, Davy and Jack alternating, I suppose, on the horse this season, and what's happened there. He's going to have a phenomenal chance. I think he'll. You know, it was the one concern, I suppose, would be that he disappointed at Cheltenham last year, but I'm willing to forgive him that, and I think he's a great chance if he turns up.
Moving on then to Galloping Deschamps winning the Irish Gold Cup. It was a good performance. It didn't really set me alight anyway. Visually, I'm not sure, is this horse a very short price favourite, or should he be a very short price favourite for the Gold Cup? What do you make of it, Emma? Were you impressed?
Yeah, look, he's definitely a very short price, but he'd still be my one coming into the Gold Cup, to be honest. At the start of the year, maybe I was probably doubting. He like last year, he was a very exuberant horse, and he's jumping and he's just style of running. He was all very flashy, all very showy. And in fairness, whatever Willie changed about him, he seems to be a lot more kind of a Gold Cup type horse now. You know, he's kind of conserving all of his energy for the right time in the race. He's not jumping as flashy, which maybe is putting people off him visually, I suppose. But you know, he's jumping maybe like a horse who will stay the 3 mile 2 and win the Gold Cup for me anyway. People probably knocking him, or was it Fury Road was kind of upside him coming to the last, but in fairness to Galloping Deschamps, when Paul really got after him, he just sprinted away in the last just after jumping the last fence. So he took a long time to pull him up as well. I think he was going on for a long while. So it just kind of convinced me that he would stay the 3 mile 2, which was probably the only doubt I had about him before this race. So no, I thought Statler ran a good race, and the Gold Cup test will probably be more to his abilities rather than the 3 miles at Leopardstown. But I don't see anything beating Galloping Deschamps at this time. Look, as short as he is, but he'd still be my Gold Cup horse.
Okay, fair enough. I'm going to move on then to the big one, which was, well, the big one for lots of reasons, is State Man beating Honeysuckle. That was an astonishing race for lots of reasons. The first one was that in advance of it, on the morning, you could have 9-4 Honeysuckle on Betfair, and by the off, she was into 11-8. So there was huge confidence behind her. I think it was public confidence more so than the big punters. I think the big punters backed the winner somehow. Johnny, what did you make of it?
Yeah, the gamble you mentioned, Vinny, I thought was baffling, to be honest. But you know, some people were making the case for her getting weight and all that, and you know, maybe making the case that the Hatton's Grace form was strong and that it wasn't you know, that bad that she lost the race. Whereas for me, I thought the Hatton's Grace just suggested that she was eminently vulnerable taking on a horse, State Man. And you spoke about the form of you know, Blue Lord and his stablemate over the Christmas, and the reversal here. The form line between Stateman and Vauban here was almost identical, and it was a slightly different race, maybe the way it worked out. Vauban, I thought, had probably an easier trip here, and he was just about getting up to nearly nab Honeysuckle on the line, but neither of them could live with Stateman. And the big news as we're recording this morning, such as it is that contrary to what they've said, they would do their stretching Honeysuckle out to the Mares Hurdle at Cheltenham. And regular listeners will know I don't like these Mares races. But if I owned Honeysuckle, to be honest, that's exactly what I would do. Her unbeaten record is gone. And let's be honest, she really has very little chance of beating Constitution Hill and Stateman at Cheltenham, for all that she's brilliant at Cheltenham. And I think her being taken out of the race doesn't do much to take away from it. She'll be very interested in the Mares race. I thought she performed very well. She did an uncomplicated trip. But Stateman just keeps delivering, and it was an excellent performance from him. And I'm not sure he'll get that close to Constitution Hill, but I think he might give him a race.
Yeah, it's looking like, well, he's into a solid second favourite now. The interesting thing for me in all of this is I just heard some quotes from Danny Mullins, and he's on about the fact that Stateman against Constitution Hill, and he says, don't rule out Vauban. He says there's still a big day on this horse, so it'll be interesting to see if Vauban, like, they obviously consider a horse very highly, has some very, very good form, but just Stateman looks a good bit better than Vauban, and you'd imagine that we're still looking at a situation where Constitution Hill is probably still a good bit better than Stateman. So it's interesting. The other thing then, of course, Emma, going back, whatever it was, probably 6-8 weeks ago, I was saying that I thought Honeysuckle should go for the Mares if she was going to go to Cheltenham. Everyone thought it was a little bit controversial. Now everyone, including the connections, have come around to that idea. Would you think the same? Is that the right place for her to retire? I think she'll go off with a fine send-off in Cheltenham, a race she can realistically win again. She's won it before. It'd be her fourth win in Cheltenham if she can do it. It'd be a fabulous send-off. What do you think?
Yeah, look, when you were mentioning that a few weeks ago, I was against you as well. But yeah, I was standing around the parade ring when she was walking back in, and the reception she got. I think everyone just wants to see her again. And look, there's not much point in running on the champion hurdle now, because she's not going to beat Stateman. And if she's not going to beat Stateman, she's more than likely not going to beat Constitution Hill. And what's the point running for place money? I mean, she's the great mare. If she was a bit closer to Stateman, we'd maybe say she'd improve. But it's hard to see her making up that kind of ground on him. I think he won with a lot in hand. So look, going to the Mares Hurdle, and I think, look, people are talking about Brandy Love and Marie's Rock all being very good mares, but Honeysuckle, look, she was dropped £5, I think, by the handicapper for her run on Sunday. So she's down to 160 now, but that's still a nice bit higher than anything else in the race. So she's not at her best, obviously, and the handicapper has reacted to that. But I think she's still well good enough to win the Mares Hurdle. And what a day it would be! The Tuesday at Cheltenham. I wasn't going to Cheltenham now, but since it was announced that she'll be there, I'm kind of thinking, I'm looking up some last minute flights and all that, because I was hoping she'd win on Sunday just for the reception, and we were going around interviewing a lot of people at the track, and everyone wanted her to win. It was kind of a head over heart thing, I suppose, really. But yeah, to see her once more, I think everyone just wants to see it. Look, whatever happens, and it'll just be a nice way to go out to let the English fans see her as well, I suppose, because the people have a great connection to her, and we saw that on Sunday with the reception she got going back in.
Yeah, win, lose or draw. I think it'll be like Tiger Road last year. She'll get an unbelievable reception at the home of horse racing, of National Hunt horse racing anyway. I think it's fabulous. She needs to go to Cheltenham. She needs to go out there, and that's the perfect race for her, because she's a realistic chance of winning it. Now, last thing, out of the weekend, give me a horse you think people should look out for, follow, whether it was a winner or a loser, I don't mind. Johnny, have you got one for me?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Lassie Mouth, Vinny. I'm obviously, I mean, you're expecting Willie Mullins Hot Pots he had so many of them, you're probably expecting them not all to win. Now, if you're to tell me that Lassie Mouth, Blue Lord and Facile Vega would be all beaten, I'd be pretty amazed at that. But I thought of the three, she was the one who didn't really lose anything except the race. I just, as I mentioned earlier, I thought so much went wrong. She did a great turn of foot. I'm with you. I thought, she ran a brilliant race considering all that happened. And for me, she's still the one to beat in the Triumph. So I'm going to give Lassie Mouth as mine to follow.
Okay. Emma, what about you?
I think it's my third time giving him as one to follow now, but Good Land, I think he was really impressive. First race of the weekend, and the confidence Barry Connell had afterwards probably even blew it up even more for me. For the Ballymore, he said he thinks he could win the Supreme if he didn't have Marine National. He'd probably be in that. So that kind of shows the quality of horse he thinks he has. And I don't think I've ever heard a trainer as bullishly confident about his chances. So yeah, I'm getting excited about him for the Ballymore, and he's still a kind of a backable price. Is he 5-1 around that kind of price? So yeah, he's my one, I think, for the Cheltenham Festival off that.
Okay, for me, I'm going to pick a horse that ran in the same race. I'm pretty confident about this one too. I fancied it at the weekend. I thought it was a wrong price. A horse called Cool Survivor. It's a Gigginstown horse that ran in that same race. Cool Survivor was one of the few horses in the Good Land race that had already got the form in the book. Probably didn't have the potential over hurdles of some of the others, including the winner, but had good form in the book and definitely stays the trip. It stays 3 miles and beyond. So I was very surprised the way the horse was ridden. They changed the tactics. It has been a front runner. They dropped it out last. Not a very quick pace in that race, I didn't think. I thought they were all well bunched. They weren't going mad in front with Good Land. But in the end, this horse flew home, finished fourth, only beaten a neck for third. I think Albert Bartlett is written all over the horse, and you can still have 25-1. It looks a fair bet to me anyway. I thought that horse definitely is better than the bare form if you watch the race back. Anyway, that's us for the weekend, or for looking back at the weekend. Thanks so much for watching, and if you could subscribe to our YouTube channel, you'll get all the information about what's coming up over the next number of weeks, because we've a lot of Cheltenham content coming up. We'll have all sorts of previews and different things around Cheltenham, so if you want to keep an eye on all our video content, do subscribe to our channel. Johnny, Emma, thanks so much for joining me, and we'll see you all again next week. Bye for now.